Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Bible in the year 2021. We are on day 233, and we are reading through Jeremiah 41 to 45. And we have some very interesting things to go over today. So, starting right in on verse 1 on chapter 45, we find an assassination here. But we'll remember that the leader had been warned here. So in the seventh month, Ishmael, now he was warned that Ishmael had been hired by the king of Ammon to assassinate him because he represented Babylon. And it was impossible for Ammon to attack Babylon. So they attacked the representative who is in Israel. So in the seventh month, Ishmael, Nethaniah's son and Elishama's grandson, who was from a royal family and who was one of the chief officers of the king, came with 10 men to Gedaliah, Ahikam's son, at Mizpah. While they were eating a meal together, Ishmael, Nethaniah's son, and the 10 men got up and struck down Gedaliah, Ahikam's son, and Shaphn's grandson with the sword. They murdered him because he had been appointed over the region by the king of Babylon. Now, Ishmael was one of Gedaliah's officials, and here he became a traitor because he had been paid off. Now, here's the problem with Ishmael the spy. So in verse 10, Ishmael captured the rest of the people who were at Mizpah. So he killed so many, he captured the rest of them, including the daughters of the king and all those assigned to Gedaliah, Ahikam's son, at Mizpah by Nebuzaradan, the captain of the special guard. Then Ishmael, Nethaniah's son, set out to cross over to the Ammonites with the hostages. So, he had done what he was supposed to do, but now he wants to get some profit from it as well, not just what he was paid. But if he takes these hostages, then he can seek ransom for them. But he has to get to the safety of Ammon. And here we find there's a collection of tragedies that happen here because we find people trying to do what they think is right. So we have in verses 11 to 13, Johanan, Kareah's son, and all the army officers at his side. So these are those who had been with Israel's king. They had gone into hiding when Jerusalem fell. So the officers at his side heard of the terrible acts committed by Ishmael, Nethaniah's son. So they want to do what is right here. So they mustered all their forces and went to fight him. They found Ishmael, Nethaniah's son, at the great pool in Gibeon. When all those taken by Ishmael at Mizpah saw Johanan, Kareah's son, and all his army officers with him, they were delighted. So, Ishmael is attacked here. He actually escapes with a few men. They end up taking none of the hostages because the hostages are all rescued. And then after doing what was right, we find a response of fear because the governor who had been put in place by Babylon has now been assassinated. And they're afraid that the Babylonians are just going to come in and wipe everybody else out. So we find in verse 17 to 18, they set out for Egypt on the way at Gereth Shimham near Bethlehem because they were afraid of what the Babylonians would do when they found out that Ishmael, Nethaniah's son, had killed Gedaliah, Ahikam's son, whom the king of Babylon had appointed over the region. So you can understand, it's not an unreasonable fear that they have, but it is responsive fear, them running to Egypt to try to get away from any consequences that might fall. So they do something out of instinct, I guess. And it's not that they know Yahweh at all, because you remember, there's no Yahweh worship left. Everything was polluted by all kinds of other gods. And we will see later on that their heart is not for Yahweh whatsoever. But in this case, they know that there's a prophet probably the last prophet that's in the land nearby. So they go to him. So in verse 1-3 of chapter 42, then all the army officers, including Johanan, Kareah's son, and Jezaniah, Hoshaiah's son, and the rest of the people, from the least to the greatest, approached Jeremiah the prophet and said to him, we have something to ask you. Please pray to the Lord your God for us. Get the language there, your God. This small group for us, as you can see, we were once many, but now are very few. May the Lord your God show us where we should go and what we should do. So they're not actually seeking direction, they're seeking blessing. And you know, quite often when we go to God, we already have our plans fixed and we're asking for his blessing. We don't want his input. We don't want him to change our mind on anything. We're just looking for blessing. And that happens more often than what most of us are willing to admit. So we have these noble words in verse 5-6. Then they said to Jeremiah, may the Lord be a true and faithful witness against us if we fail to do everything that the Lord your God tells us through you, whether we like it or not. We will obey all that the Lord our God, suddenly our God, says. We will obey the Lord our God, to whom we're sending you, so it may go well for us. So whatever image that they have of Yahweh, don't forget it's polluted with all these other gods. They do not have that same awareness that we do, the same understanding, the same knowledge, because they've lost most of that. So they're sending Jeremiah off to consult in their mind some rendition of Yahweh. And they're making this pledge that no matter what, no matter whether they like it or not, they will obey it. And words are easy, but actions cost, right? So what we find is actually a response from Yahweh, a response filled with grace and love. We see the Father's heart here in verse 10-12. If you live in this land, I will build you up. And this is actually the promise that the Lord gave to me and why I'm still here in Quebec, going over 20 years now, because when I had sought his permission to actually leave Quebec on 2 different occasions, this is what he gave me without me knowing that this was what he was giving me. In other words, I received a reference and I looked it up and this is what it was. And he did that twice, a few years apart from each other. So it's powerful. If you live in this land, I will build you up and not pull you down. I will plant you and not dig you up, because I grieve over the disaster I have brought upon you. You don't have to be afraid of the king of Babylon, whom you now fear. You don't have to be afraid of him anymore, declares the Lord. For I will be with you to save you and rescue you from his hand. I will be merciful to you, and he will be merciful and return you to your land. This is a wonderful promise here. Just absolutely, it should be reassuring to them that Yahweh has their back, and Babylon is actually under his jurisdiction. And then he warns them that the blessing isn't found where they want to go. You know, they want to go to Egypt because they think that's going to be a land of blessing, that they're going to be safe there. And he tells them the blessing is not found there, verses 13-17. But if you say, we won't live in this land, you will disobey the Lord your God. And if you insist, no, we're going to live in Egypt where there's no war, battle, alarms, or hunger, and there we will stay, then listen to the Lord's word, you remaining Judeans. The Lord of heavenly forces, the God of Israel, proclaims, if you are determined to go to Egypt and you then go and live there, then the war you fear will seize you in the land of Egypt, and the famine you dread will hunt you down in Egypt, and there you will die. Every one of you who is determined to go and live in Egypt will die by the sword, famine, and disease. No one will escape the disaster that I will bring upon them there. It's pretty harsh. But look what they do. In chapter 43, verse 2, they turn around and they blame the messenger. They don't like what they're hearing. So, suddenly it's not God that's speaking, right? I mean, how many times do we see it? How many times have we done it? How many times, when the Lord responds to us, we turn around and say, well, it can't be the Lord. That must be the enemy trying to persuade me not to do what I know the Lord wants me to do, right? Azariah, Hoshiah's son, and Johan, Kareah's son, and all the arrogant men said to Jeremiah, you're lying to us. The Lord our God didn't send you to tell us not to go to Egypt to live. And in fact, they turn around and they blame it on Baruch. They say Baruch, who is Jeremiah's assistant, it was all Baruch's doing. So disobedience is disobedience no matter what. Even if fear is the motivation of that disobedience, it's still disobedience. Even if you can understand that disobedience, it's still disobedience. Verse 4-7. So Jehoianan, Kareah's son, and all the army officers and the rest of the people disobeyed the Lord's command to stay in the land of Judah. Johanan, Kareah's son, and all of the army officers took the remaining Judeans who had returned to the land of Judah after being scattered among the nations, men, women, children, the king's daughters, everyone Nebuzaradan, the captain of the special guard, had left with Gedaliah, Ahikam's son, and Shaphan's grandson, including Jeremiah the prophet and Baruch, Neriah's son. They went to the land of Egypt as far as Taphanhes, for they wouldn't obey the Lord. Unbelievable. They took the willing and they took Jeremiah and Baruch as prisoners. They made Jeremiah disobey the word of the Lord. So we get the prophet's final words to the disobedient. These are the Lord's words to them in chapter 44 and verses 7-8. Now the Lord of heavenly forces, the God of Israel, proclaims, why are you committing this huge mistake that will cost you your lives? Every man, woman, child, and infant will be eliminated from the midst of Judah, and no one will be left. Why do you anger me by what you do, by burning incense to other gods in the land of Egypt, where you have come to live? You will be eliminated and become an object of cursing and disgrace among all the nations of the earth. Now, from my experience, and probably your experience as well, when a person has set their heart against the Lord, it becomes hard. No matter what is said to them, it becomes hard. They will have to face something that will break them before that heart can be soft again. So look what this says. To this day, in verse 10, you haven't shown any sorrow for what you have done, and you haven't revered me or followed my instruction and my laws that I set before you and your ancestors. How painful. So the final judgment, I will take the few remaining Judeans who were determined to go to the land of Egypt to live. They will all perish there. They will fall by the sword and perish due to famine. The least to the greatest will die by the sword and by famine. They will become an object of cursing, scorn, contempt, and disgrace. I will punish those who live in the land of Egypt, just as I punished Jerusalem with war, famine, and disease. This was so unnecessary. And then we get the wrong response here from them. This shows exactly what I was talking about, that when you enter into that determined disobedience against Yahweh, the heart becomes hard. Verses 16-18. We're not going to listen to a word you have said to us in the Lord's name. No, we're going to do exactly what we want. Sound familiar at all? How many times have you heard that? Have you heard it from your lips? I know you've heard it from others. We're going to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven and pour out drink offerings to her, as we and our ancestors, our kings and our officials have done in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. Then we had plenty to eat and we were thriving. We didn't have any troubles. But ever since we stopped burning incense to the Queen of Heaven and pouring drink offerings to her, we have been destroyed by the sword and by famine. They can't even do the math on this. They're just so hard that they're also short-sighted. They can't see that before they started doing this, they had plenty. And that was because they did this, it brought them to that place of judgment, a place that saw them lose everything. And then we have a final word for Baruch. And it's a hard prophecy, but it's got that silver lining, but it's still a hard prophecy. What a difficult time to live in. Verses 3-5. You have said, I can't take it anymore. The Lord has added sorrow to my pain. I'm worn out from groaning and can find no rest. You can understand this is a heartfelt thing, right? From Baruch, he has been there with Jeremiah every step of the way. He's had to hide to save his life. They faced famine, they faced war, they faced hatred, they faced jail. I mean, they've all of this. And he's been with Jeremiah every way. I'm worn out from groaning and can find no rest. This is what you should say to him. The Lord proclaims, I'm breaking down everything I have built up. I'm digging up that which I have planted, the entire land. So he's telling him, like, this is going, this is happening. Like, this is why you're facing this. You seek great things for yourself, and who doesn't? But don't bother. Yeah, there's going to be nothing there. I'm bringing disaster on all humanity, declares the Lord. But wherever you go, I will let you escape with your life. And that's a silver lining right there. Wherever you go, I will let you escape with your life. And that's a hard prophecy. Like, nothing is going to come of your life, but you will get to have your life. Yeah, well, what a note to leave on, right? Okay. So there we are. Jeremiah is a prisoner to the Judeans in Egypt, and he has given his final prophecies there. We still have some prophecies coming up, prophecies for the nations. But okay, so you guys be blessed in this day. Let's learn our lessons from all the stuff that we're reading. Our Father is for us. He wants to prosper us, but he needs us to walk in obedient love with him. To trust him. There's no sense even saying you have a relationship if you cannot walk trusting him in the best times and in the worst of times. It's all about our relationship with him and each other. Okay, you guys be blessed. We'll catch up with each other again tomorrow.